Imagine this. You find a beach. It's hidden and hard to get to. Most people drive past it without knowing it is there. And you're marveled by the scenery, the peace and quiet, the sound of nature in tune with your spirit. And you continue to return to this location frequently. You learn the tides. You find the exact spot where the light hits the water in a way you've never seen anywhere else. The place starts to feel like yours, not because you own it, but because you understand it. And that took time. Then someone posts a photo of it online. It's a beautiful photo, and it goes viral. Then within a month, the car park is full by 7 in the morning. There are food stalls, a painted arrow pointing at the view, a plethora of hashtags online, and a news channel talking about whether the access road needs construction. You go back one last time and notice the changes. The water is the same, and the sunlight does the same thing. Nothing has been moved or removed, and yet something is gone. You cannot point to what was taken. You only know that the place that felt like yours now feels like nothing in particular. And the people around you are having a perfectly good time and have no idea why you're standing there as if it's a funeral.
Ridiculous, man.
What's wrong, Toombs?
Me know that was supposed to be metaphorical, but me still strangely offended by it, cause something about that feels very relatable, man.
Good evening. Coming to you from my library, where several of the things on these shelves used to belong to a small group of people who understood them before corporations did. The beach is not just a metaphor. The beach is everywhere, and it does not only happen to places. In 1991, a band from Aberdeen, Washington called Nirvana released a song called Smells Like Teen Spirit. The song is about feeling alienated from consumer culture. It is uncomfortable and specific. The small community that had been following the band understood it immediately. It felt like theirs. It said the one thing they had been trying to say before anyone invented words for it. And within 6 months, it was the most played song in the world. Then within a year, it was in commercials. The song about hating consumer culture had become a product. Kurt Cobain watched this happen and said it was one of the most disorienting experiences of his life. He could not explain what had been lost. He only knew that something had. The new audience introduced to the band was having a great time. They just understood something different from what he had written.
But Winston, that is the worst feeling in the world. Watching strangers love the thing you built for completely different reasons than why you built it.
Perhaps not, but let's present more evidence and see if I can persuade you. Let's move on to gaming. Dark Souls was released in 2011. It had a modest sales, but extraordinary word of mouth from a niche community. The game was brutally hard by design. There was no hand-holding, no markers telling you where to go. The players who found it built a culture around shared suffering and shared discovery, leaving messages for strangers, dying to the same boss dozens of times until the pattern clicked. The difficulty was not keeping people out. The difficulty was the point, and it was what the community was built on. However, by 2022, Elden Ring released, and it was the peak of that same design. It had sold 23 million copies and won every major game award that year. And within weeks of release, prominent gaming journalists were demanding an easy mode, not for accessibility reasons, simply because the game had gone mainstream, and the mainstream had not signed up for what the original community understood was the whole experience. The game did not change, the audience around it did, and the new audience immediately wanted the thing to become something other than what it was built to be.
Imagine arriving at somebody's dinner party and asking them to change the recipe because you don't like the ingredients. My mother would have slapped them silly.
Let's jump over to the comic book industry. Marvel built a passionate and loyal community across decades. Then the MCU exploded, and Marvel looked at the casual audience those films were creating and made a decision. They started tailoring their comic books for that audience instead of the ones that had kept them alive for 40 years. The stories changed, the characters changed, the tone changed. Everything shifted toward people who had watched the films and might pick up a comic book if it felt familiar enough. The loyal fan base looked at what Marvel was producing and it did not recognize it. They left, and the casual MCU audience that Marvel was pivoting to serve never showed up to buy their products. They were never going to. They had the films, and that was enough for them. Marvel had spent years alienating the people who loved them to chase an audience that was not interested. and they ended up with neither. Let's jump to the next topic, and this one hits close to home: anime and manga. For me, it started before I can name it. I noticed the quality declining a decade ago. The stories were getting thinner and generic. The art was getting faster and sloppy. More titles are being released every season than the year before, each one assembled from a similar IP with the same protagonist but a different name and maybe a new hair color. I could feel something changing before I had the language for what it was. Then one afternoon, I was being dragged to a shopping mall and something clicked into place that I wish had not. Almost every store on every window had the same faces: Naruto, Goku, Luffy, Gojo, All Might. Not just one store, and not a dedicated anime retailer. Every store. Forever 21, Hot Topic, Zoomies, Journeys, Spencer's. Brands that were supposed to be distinct from each other, each with their own identity and their own customer, all looking like they had been dressed by the same hand overnight. The same IPs repeated across every surface of every window in every direction I looked. So I stopped walking, and I noticed the people. They wore the same faces on their shirts, their bags, their pins. The same IPs that I had just seen on every shelf was on everyone, everywhere, all at once. And I felt something I had no name for it until later. That specific nausea Kurt Cobain described watching his music become the thing it was written against. The feeling of seeing something you love become a surface that anyone could wear without knowing what it was underneath it. Now, whether the declining quality of Eastern entertainment and the mall consumerism moment are connected, I cannot prove. However, my mind connected them anyways. And once it did, I cannot separate them. The oversaturation on the shelves and the oversaturation in the release schedules started to look like the same decision made by the same people for the same reason. Not because someone hated anime, but because someone had discovered it was profitable. And profit at that scale does not care what it consumes. That is when I understood what had happened. Not to a trend, to something that had mattered. Whether it's entertainment, food, academics, or religion, it is the same pattern every time. Something specific becomes popular, becomes mainstream, becomes a product built for everyone, which means it is made for no one in particular anymore. That pattern has 4 distinct faces, and each one does a different kind of damage. Let's examine what they are. 4 things happen when something beloved goes mainstream. Most people collapse all 4 into one complaint and then wonder why the complaint never goes anywhere. It does not go anywhere because it is not one problem, it is 4. The first is corporate capture. The IP gets bought or optimized for mass appeal, and the source material gets permanently changed to serve the new audience. Such as Disney buying Star Wars and overriding 40 years of expanded universe material that the original community had treated as canon. The original version does not just get diluted, it gets overwritten at the source officially.
Capitalism is where creativity goes to die, my friend.
The second is meaning capture. A new majority of people arrive with a different understanding of what that thing means. And because there are more of them, their interpretation becomes the dominant one. The Joker getting his own movie with a sympathetic backstory and a generation of people adopting that as the real Joker. Elden Ring going mainstream and the dominant conversation becoming about whether it needs an easy mode rather than about what the difficulty was designed to do. The original communities are now outnumbered in the arguments about what their own thing is. The third is identity capture. The aesthetic gets adopted without the knowledge. Being a gamer, an anime fan, a comic book reader, these were identities that communicated something specific to people who understood the reference. They took time to earn, and when mainstream adoption makes the identity available to anyone without investment, the signal collapses. The identity no longer says anything because anyone can wear it. Skateboarding became an Olympic sport in 2021. A community built entirely on rejecting institutional legitimacy was inducted into the most institutionally legitimate event on the planet. The skating did not change. The meaning of the identity did. The original skaters did not leave. The thing became something else while they were still doing it.
Me remember when being called a nerd was supposed to ruin your social life, man. Now corporations put anime girls on bank cards.
The final one is the community capture. This one has no villain, no corporation, no theft, just scale. Early Twitch from 2012 to 2014, the community was small enough that regular viewers knew each other by username. Streamers knew their audience personally. Chat had inside jokes that had a history behind them, references that were required for you to have been there, norms that took time to learn. The community had a texture built by the same group of people returning to the same spaces over time. Then Twitch scaled. Chat filled with people who arrived without the history. The pace changed, the language changed, and the norms dissolved. The original community members were still there. They were just outnumbered by people who had no relationship to what the space used to be. Nobody stole anything. Nobody changed the rules. The community simply grew past itself. And the original members became the strangers in the rooms they built. 4 capture types, 4 examples, all of them running simultaneously right now across gaming, anime, comic books, music, food, and religion. Here is where the investigation gets uncomfortable. Everything so far has been about what outside forces do to things people love. But there is a layer underneath all of that most videos on this topic refuse to touch. The original fans were not only loving the thing, they were loving being the kind of person who loved it before everyone else. The identity built on finding something early required the exclusivity to work. It had value because most people did not have access to it. When the mainstream arrived, that value disappeared, and a significant part of what the original fans were actually consuming went with it. The rage at the new fans, the gatekeeping, the accusations of being fake, some of that is about protecting the integrity of the thing. But some of it is grief for a self-image that the mainstream accidentally destroyed just by showing up. The original fans are right that something was lost. They are just not always honest about everything else that was lost. And that dishonesty is why this conversation goes in circles. In 2023, gaming revenues hit $180 billion, almost matching the combined revenues of film, television, and music combined. Hollywood noticed immediately. Studios began describing gaming publicly as their next IP goldmine. One industry strategist laid out the plan in plain language.
Shepherd fans through a video game, into a film adaptation, then into merchandise. Keep them inside the ecosystem as long as possible.
He also noted that what is about to happen to gaming is unlike what had happened to comic books 20 years ago, and he said it as a compliment. He was describing a successful extraction model, and the comic community that got extracted had a different opinion about how successful it was.
Me heard this same speech about jazz in the 40s, about punk in the 70s, about hip-hop in the 90s. Word for word almost. Anime is next, by the way. Netflix already there. One Piece is only the Trojan horse.
Toombs is not being dramatic in this comment. The anime industry is already showing what happens after mainstream arrival. Right now, the industry releases hundreds of titles every single season. Same aesthetic template with just different hair colors. The creativity that built the original culture that made people fall in love with anime in the first place is now buried under a volume of product designed for a market that cannot tell the difference between something original and something that looks like something original. The fans who loved anime before it was popular now spend more time filtering through output than actually watching something worth watching. The thing they loved is still there somewhere. They just have to dig through 100 episodes of the same show with different names to find it. That is what mainstream demand produces when industry responds with volume instead of quality. Not more of the good thing, and an overwhelming supply of imitations of the surface of the good thing. Gaming is next in that line. The announcement has already been made. The only question is how long the original community has before the filtering begins. If you're not yet convinced, perhaps one final example will suffice. In 2016, Suicide Squad released a live-action movie adaptation. Margot Robbie was cast to play Harley Quinn, but the film was demolished by fans and critics alike. However, Harley Quinn's costume became the most popular Halloween outfit of the year and is still prevalent today. But something even worse happened. DC Comics permanently changed Harley Quinn in the source material to match the film version. The original character, created in 1992 for Batman the Animated Series, had a specific psychology and a specific look that reflected who she was. None of that was consulted. The popular version was worth more money, so the source material was updated to serve the popularity. The origin did not capture the mainstream captured the origin and rewrote it completely.
Me poor, precious Harley. They turned me hot psycho killer into a generic hoochie mama costume. That is what she is now. Aisle 7 at Party City, right next to the inflatable dinosaur. And the bastards don't even care anymore.
Think about how a star dies. Some become a supernova and burn incredibly bright and fast, and then they are gone. A short life with an intense light. And the people who saw them remember them forever. Other stars, such as a neutron star, expand slowly over billions of years into something enormous and cold, and eventually they collapse under their own weight into nothing. They lasted longer, but nobody mourns them the same way. But this investigation has been building towards something different. Some things are built to be experienced by people willing to pay the cost of understanding them. That cost is time. The cost is effort. The cost is developing a taste of something that does not immediately explain itself. When that cost gets removed, the thing does not become more available, it becomes less of itself.
You either die a hero or live long enough to become the villain man.
Well said, Harvey. That is the choice every beloved thing eventually faces. Stay small and specific and burn out on its own terms, or grow and expand and survive by becoming something it was not. Neither option is clean, both cost something real. Return to my metaphor in the introduction. The beach is the same. The light still does the same thing at the same hour. Everything that had made it worth finding is still there. And nothing that arrives after the parking lot is packed will give that feeling back. The ones who remember what it was are the only ones who can see what has changed. And they are always the last ones anyone asks. But these are just my observations. If this investigation left you with more questions than answers, that is by design. Subscribe so the next case file finds you. And if you want to support Tomb's coffee addiction, the link is in the description below. Until we meet again, my library will remain open.
Please, me need your support. The algorithm is an absolute beast, me tell ya. A beast!